Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited. For several months now, I have been receiving an email every Friday on the dot from Melissa. And I've just been so impressed with her dedication and thoroughness in providing these pages and pages of resource. If you don't know, we upload it every week to our economy page on the Vibrant Hawaii website. And I just started thinking, how many folks really know about this resource? Is it getting into the hands of the right people? There's so much that is available for us across so many different focus areas. And I thought it would just be amazing to see if Melissa would be willing to share with us, and reached out to her. It was a total cold call, but she was so gracious to say, yes, I'd love to share with your community on Hawaii Island. And we are just so pleased to have her here. Such a blessing. So let me introduce her. Melissa Unemori Hampe, partner at Skog Rasmussen LLC, brings to clients the benefit of decades of public, private, and nonprofit experience, working with entities in Hawaii, across the country, and internationally. In her 11 years on Capitol Hill, she performed legislative work for Congresswoman Patsy Mink, the Senate Democratic Policy Committee, and U.S. Senator Daniel Akaka. Melissa advocated before Congress and the administration for public policy and funding at a national nonprofit that sets industry standards for youth mentoring, Mentor National Mentoring Partnership. Melissa developed and is co-leading 2 statewide initiatives: the Grants Technical Assistance Services Program for the Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations and the Nonprofit Grants Working Group that is working to improve collaboration between the government and nonprofit sectors. Aloha, Melissa. Thanks for being with us today.
Aloha, and thank you for that generous introduction. Really appreciate that. Let me go ahead and share screen. Okay. All right. Can everyone see that now? Resources for nonprofits. Okay, excellent. And I'm going to move some things around. I can't see all of you. And so as we go through the presentation, please go ahead and put questions in the chat, or there will be times as I go through each of these resources to pause for any additional, any questions and comments. So thank you for giving me the time today. So thank you also, for going through a little bit about our firm. We are based on Maui. But we're lucky to have clients across Hawaii, again, in several other states, in Japan, Australia, and Canada. And I just feel so blessed to be doing that from here. And, many of those include local and national nonprofits. So happy to bring lessons learned from my work at the intersection of the 3 sectors, as was mentioned. Just being able on the congressional side to bring the funding into the pots of money that then organizations and entities in Hawaii and across the country could apply. Again, a year at a national nonprofit for youth mentoring. So being able to understand that side of things and the need for resources and the limited resources. And then another more than 13 years in private sector, which, really is about combining the work on government affairs and grants, and also helping to advocate for nonprofit and other causes on the grant side. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take you through a menu of resources that are available here in Hawaii and nationally also. Most of them free. Some of them will have a price tag, but usually a modest one for what is provided. And so, because we have limited time, I'm going to be going through these very quickly. So again, feel free to put questions in the chat or hold them for Q&A. So the first resource really focuses on one of the broadest of categories, and that's on federal resources. And of course, this is your taxpayer money at work. Right. So hopefully, you're getting some bang for the buck on some of the guidance that you get from the federal agencies. So for anyone who has looked for or applied to federal grants, of course, this is your best friend, right? Grants.gov. So not only are you able to search through any of the usually more than 2,000 funding opportunities here, but you can also have short tutorials. You can read through some helpful blogs, things about grants management, things about how to look for grants. You can see templates and do all kinds of other things in preparation for grant submission, in addition to looking at the opportunities. But as Janice was talking about the list that I'll get to in a second, I do curate that for Hawaii sources. So, some of that searching is already done for you, but if you have a very specialized area, it's really good to get familiar with this resource. Another thing on the federal side, and this is a little hard to read, but that's because there are just so many federal grant making agencies, and everyone will get the slides after this, I believe. So, these agencies cover just about every discretionary function of the federal government: agriculture, food systems, childcare, family assistance, healthcare, environment, the arts, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the thing is, there are so many resources out there. And let's talk about trainings just on the federal grant space itself. Federal agencies really are interested in generating good applications, ones that really speak to the requirements and priorities of a grant program or of the agency itself. So one of the things they will do to build capacity is to hold detailed grant trainings, provide technical assistance, and that all will help you as you knit the grants together. Some of the program officers will also answer specific questions. And so that's important to attend some of these sessions so you can actually get them in real time. So this one is just a screenshot of the Administration for Native Americans Training and Technical Assistance page. And they do provide this resource through a local provider, Ka'anani Au. They've been just a major resource here for the Pacific. And so Anna is just one of the sources that you can go to, especially for any organizations that are Native Hawaiian. Okay. So there are also many other agencies that hold these grant webinars, podcasts, types of trainings. And I know it's all about like time, right? Trying to figure out when you can grab the time to see these, but a lot of those are recorded. You can always go back and take a look at them in real time, maybe like double time, and just try to absorb all the information that they provide out there. But again, these are free. These are your taxpayer dollars at work. So if anyone is trying to charge you for these, that's just, pilau. I mean, these are free. So this little 100% free stamp, I see that on several pages in the federal agencies, just because there are some that really will try to be opportunistic on this, unfortunately. But so again, these are good opportunities to participate in the federal process, or even just to see what the potential competition may be. You can see what other entities are on the webinars. Okay. So I'm going to go to .org, but any questions, just sort of top line on federal resources? Okay. Okay, let's talk about another broad range then of entities, and this is national nonprofit entities. And these, of course, usually take a broader lens and put together resources at a very high level for the nonprofit sector and many others. So one of the things to mention is the National Council of Nonprofits. And HANO, as was mentioned, the Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations, is Hawaii's member. There are members in just about every state, I believe, and that provides just a wide range of resources. A lot of them will help with advocacy for different causes, charitable tax deduction issues, for instance, or other things that might affect the sector at large. But they have some very interesting information that you can then pull down sometimes and use for your grant applications. Also have national think tanks like the Coalition on Human Needs, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, the Food Resource Action Center. You have a number of those different national nonprofits that will aggregate information about the impacts of federal policies on various communities, and sometimes even state by state information. These, and other organizations also host studies. They'll take the pulse of a certain field, produce data that way, or maybe they even hold trainings on various subject matters, policies, processes, all of that. And you can usually sign up for e-newsletters from them. But a lot of them are also membership organizations that can offer certain protected benefits that are just for members. So, you could find so many resources, probably an association or organization for just about every health condition, every profession, every industry. There's just a lot out there that's free that you can look for. So another set of national organizations to spotlight are professional grants organizations. So I'm a member of the GPA, or the Grant Professionals Association. And what this does is it sets forth and upholds the industry standards for grant writers. They have a lot of blogs, a lot of grant writers, either in-house or independent consultants like me, would be part of this. There's a national conference that they do and a lot of regional chapters as well, but a lot of information there. And they also do certify grant writers with the Grant Professional Certification Institute. So if you have somebody with that credential, then you know that you're probably getting some fairly good service. Similar in function is the American Grant Writers Association. Again, blogs, discussion boards, articles, and many other resources for those who are trying to compete for funding. Okay, so any comments on the national nonprofit side before I get more local? Questions? Okay. So this is the first of several HANO resources that I'm going to be talking about that are available to Hawaii nonprofits. And it's both members and non-members, in case you don't know about them. So this is a screenshot from the COVID-19 resources for nonprofits page, the HANO site, and you'll find several things here. So, including, as you see at the top, HANO's Hawaii Sector Pulse Report, and it shows you what's going on in the sector overall, and they do this every year. And then a report that I was privileged to lead, which captured lessons learned out of the CARES Act funding implementation, including talking to different entities on the Big Island and the wonderful ways that you all work together there in collaboration. They also post information about the resources available from federal COVID stimulus packages, which of course contain major investments in our communities and which are continuing to flow. So also on this page are these and other items that can help your nonprofits navigate the pandemic. Back office support, front office support, other things to consider, different policies as we continue in our recovery, tips on compliance with various federal laws, vaccine-related information, et cetera, and also some information that's aggregated from other states. So I definitely recommend that you go to the HANO site, and I'm going to talk about HANO a little bit more in a bit. This is another local resource, this Hawaii State Bar Foundation, this time from the legal sector. And so what they have, in case you don't know about this, is they're sponsoring what they've termed the Pandemic Education Program. And this is to make sure that entities have the information needed to effectively use and remain compliant when working with federal relief funds. And again, this is free, or also maybe around decisions you might make around pandemic-related operations. And so here are some of the recorded sessions that are currently available at their site. It's information for those taking advantage of SBA, Small Business Administration funding, a checklist for pandemic survival, federal grant compliance, and I presented that one, and this is on processes and tips there, and several others. But the series is still open, and so HSBF is looking for additional suggestions for topics that they could then train on as well. So feel free to suggest that directly to HSBF. Okay, any questions that popped up? Okay. So here's another HANO program, and this is specifically for nonprofits aimed at federal grants. It was mentioned during the introduction, and I'm very happy and privileged to be the main consultant for this program. So I'll just say a little bit about this. This with the red arrow, this is where on the HANO website you can find information about the program and an application to apply. So you can go to HANO Grants Corner. What this was it was started by HANO to respond to the needs of nonprofits for technical help as they're submitting maybe their first federal grant, or maybe a grant to an agency with which they're unfamiliar, they haven't applied before, or to a new program. But whichever way, this program hopes to increase the overall amount of external government funding coming into Hawaii to meet community needs. And what we did was we looked at what nonprofits in other states had been pulling down, those that were similar in population to Hawaii. And, we were maybe getting about half of what some of them were getting, Rhode Island, Maine, et cetera. So, obviously there's some room to grow here. And I'm so glad that Vibrant Hawaii is doing this toward that end. So the main point about the GTAS program is that the services are offered at no charge to qualified nonprofits. And again, it hopes to bring our nonprofits to a higher level of success when it comes to federal grants, which we know are already very competitive. It also creates connections for nonprofits to experts in the community who can help with a wide range of expertise when it comes to grants, and then also beyond once they establish that relationship. And it also encourages key themes of collaboration between entities within the sector, also across sectors, much as you're doing here. And finally, it encourages mindfulness around diversity, equity, and inclusion in grant applications. Okay, oops. So these are the basic steps in the GTAS process. And we did round 1, but there's still slots open for the second round. We can probably accommodate another, say, 3 to 5 organizations. So first, what you do is you go to the HANO Grants Corner on the HANO website, find the application there, and it asks for basic information about the organization, what program you're targeting, what idea you're looking to submit, and other pertinent information. But, we tried to make it as painless as we could. Our team then meets on a weekly basis to evaluate applications and confirm entry into the program. And then we match participant organizations with the TA providers who have a relevant background and experience for the submission. Then we enter into the engagement. And so, it could be coaching to help with the fit to the grant opportunity. It could be a section by section review of the portions of the application and responsiveness to the funding announcement. We could provide editing, or, some questions also pop up with legal or maybe accounting or budgeting issues that might arise. And we do have providers that can help with those as well. So it's a fairly flexible menu of assistance, just depending on what the nonprofit is looking for. Okay. A little hard to read perhaps, but this final GTAS slide shows the types of federal agencies targeted by our program participants. And, you can see it's a range. We had Economic Development Administration, anti-recidivism and reentry, community composting, which was funded, by the way, for a collaboration led by the City and County of Honolulu in combination with Aloha Harvest and others, digital humanities. And we just had one of our round 2 nonprofits funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. Really happy with that for Hana Arts. So, we're seeing the same kind of diversity again in the second round and welcoming other applicants. And this is for those who are pointed at funding opportunities that would close in the next couple of months. Okay, any questions here before I get to the list that Janice talked about?
I actually wanted to ask, I love this. I love, having somebody who can help guide you as you're trying to do these things. And often, especially with these larger federal organizations, there are a lot of ins and outs that you don't know until you've gone through several rounds. Mm-hmm. So is this a program that you offer continually? Like you said, there are about 3 to 5 slots, but then will it kind of open back up again at a later time?
That's what Hano's intention is. We kind of wanted to see what the interest was for this next round. The first round, definitely a lot of interest. This one, it's a little slower, but I think it's because of the cadence of the federal grants coming out, perhaps. But yeah, hopefully then, we're making the case to our funder for the program that this should continue.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any others? That's a great question. Okay, so let's get to the list. Again, this resource speaks to this resource I'm happy to hear that you're using. And overall, my team and I put this together just in an overall effort, again, it's a passion project, to help nonprofits with issues that they may have in prospecting for funding opportunities. Because we know that this could be really difficult as you're in the middle, heads down, just running programs and things like that. There's just not a lot of time to actually look at what's out there. And so, I'm glad it's posted on the Vibrant Hawaii site. We also have it posted on the Hano site at Grants Corner. And Hano goes ahead and takes my suggestions as to what things to highlight. And they also put it in their weekly e-newsletter. Okay, so that's kind of where to find it if you can't find it elsewhere, but Janice is doing a great job posting it. So this is the snapshot of the first page, and there are usually so many opportunities. We often have 50, 60, sometimes even 70 pages. kind of depends on what's live out there. And as you can see also at the top, we keep a tally where we have the running total program funding, where the totals are available. Usually it is about $21 billion open for competition. And this isn't counting a lot of the foundations that don't tell you exactly how much money is there for competition. So you can just imagine what that might add to that total. We kept the list relatively low tech, but we are looking for funding and resources for solutions to maybe make it easier to search and put it online. But right now, this is what I'm doing every Friday. And so, what you do is you can take this resource and use your keywords. Best thing is to make a list of those words. So, along the lines of your program goals, your program activities, processes, any gap areas, you can start with those word searches. Or, you can also just take the opportunities one by one if you haven't looked through the list systematically before. Like if you just set aside some time and go through them one by one, cross things out. But then after that, every subsequent Friday, I highlight in yellow the things that are new. And so it's just easy to go through then and just look at the things that are in yellow. And, this is again sorted by due date. So perhaps, you look at those that have due dates at least 30 days out. Maybe more, so you have some time to prepare, put some collaborations together, talk to your partners, get letters of support and all of that. And so, hopefully that is one way to go through it. Again, you can also do keywords along subject matter, if it's areas of food security or, even there's some advocacy ones and grassroots type efforts in there. Of course, early childhood and education and healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a lot in there. And, I can show you then on the next slide where all of this is aggregated from. So just to give you an idea, these are some of the sources I regularly monitor, often on a daily basis to populate this list. So of course, there's grants.gov. There's also the Federal Register. And actually there, it's interesting, sometimes agencies will post on the Federal Register before they post on grants.gov. So it's just good to monitor that. Individual federal agency sites, of course, and they get a little bit more in depth, especially around the national priorities that you should be putting into your grant applications. Also, e-newsletters, philanthropic resources like GrantStation and Candid. So really looking through a lot of these. Also, I get a lot from word of mouth. So, happy to take suggestions. Usually if I get them by, say, Thursday of a week, then I can get it into the Friday list. Bottom line, and they're just so many different funds, and we've aggregated them here for you. And really a lot of this, again, I mentioned it's a passion project. It's just, I've been working with a lot of different clients that were charged, I think, even $30,000 for some of the grant prospecting and aggregating resources, based on, for instance, like universities, it might be based on the enrollment at the school, which, what does that exactly have to do? It's just, so some of the ways that these aggregators do price things like that, or maybe they'll charge you $1,000 a month or something. And I just think it's, it's something that should be free because these are free resources. I think there's something in the chat. Okay, you can find this list in the, okay, thank you, Farah. So any questions there before I get into the policy map? Okay, well, I'll just keep this one coming. Okay, so this is a data resource site to put on your radar. Ramona Malahi of HUD actually put this on my radar, and this is the Hawaii policy map. So for those of you who don't know, this is a feature of the Hawaii Data Collaborative. It's in combination with the Weinberg Foundation. And what this does is it aggregates many data sets from several sources to provide you a visual representation of what's out there. So demographics, income and spending, housing, lending, several other categories. So this is just one example. What this is the SNAP retail locations. So say, this could be useful to social service agencies who want to advise clients looking for places that will allow them to use their SNAP benefits, or maybe it's something in a grant application. You can talk about the lack of, or the far distance from some of these retailers, et cetera. But that's just sort of one of the types of information. This one is another example. This is a snapshot of the Kupuna population. those 65 or older between the years 2015 and 2019 in different parts of the Big Island. So, nonprofits or others could use this information to help make decisions about how to target resources or assistance, or even take snips like this and put them in your grant applications. So, even if you don't have immediate needs for the information, it's really kind of fascinating to play around in this. And it is, again, free. Okay, this is Kukulu Switchboard. This has been a really important connector for those of you who don't know about this. So, what this is has been an excellent tech-based solution to match seekers and offerers based on a number of different resource sets. And probably no surprise, it's a service of Hano. They launched at the beginning of the pandemic, and they just relaunched it a few months ago. But just to show you a snapshot, you can ask for different things that you need: supplies, equipment, resources, people, or you could offer certain things as well. And they keep it fairly basic here then, so it's very easy to use. So let's see what we have here. This is just another snapshot of the types of things posted. The first was a job description for Kukulu itself. Not sure it's been filled yet, but they had been looking for a director, so you can post some job-related resources or asks and offers here. And the second is on the U.S. Department of Energy Technical Assistance Program for local communities looking for help overcoming environmental justice issues. So, people will post things on there about funding opportunities, or even requests for grant writers to help them respond to the funding opportunities. You also have trainings posted. I mean, there's just so much here. There's some schools, I think, that will post things like, we need help with our tech side or things like that. So, you can go to the switchboard and just kind of see what things are in there in case you need something or you want to offer something. Okay, any questions here before I get to the final resource? Okay. So this one, this is about consultants. So this is where you have to pay a bit, but not a terrible amount, because these are consultants who are experienced with and familiar with nonprofits who want to help work with nonprofits and lift the sector. So the first is Hano. Luckily, this is a broad range of offerings by Hano. They have a lot of different points of expertise. And what they do is they help organizations build capacity or add to their capacity. It could be looking to attack a specific problem, maybe work on plans for the future of the organization to make it more sustainable, or work on changes in organization key staff or leadership and all of that. So Hano can assist with that. And this is just another way to break down the areas in which they provide services. So nonprofit board development, they help with effective board governance. Strategic and operational planning helps with guiding that strategic thinking and developing clear goals, objectives, action steps. They also have succession planning and executive transition support that can help your organization or organizations for transitions whenever they occur. Facilitation is a professional support service for planning processes, collaborative conversations, problem solving. And then outcomes design addresses outcomes development at all system levels: individual, programmatic, agency, sector, and community. And finally, they also do a lot of professional development for trainings. Okay, and a second consulting resource, and full disclosure, I'm part of the leadership circle for this body. It's a statewide body. So the Hawaii Community Benefit Consultants, HUI, is a statewide network of independent consultants. This was created a number of years ago by Joyce Lee Ibarra. And what we are is a group of like-minded individuals who are dedicated to working toward the good of the community. We serve a very wide range of clients with varied missions, needs, and goals. And really just offering a lot of different strengths. We operate in a number of different areas, some of them listed here, leadership development, again, strategic planning, fund development, coaching, all of this. There are a number of consultants on the list. You can kind of look through their backgrounds. You can either search the directory, or there are some pull-down menus there to find a consulting specialty or field of interest. But these are folks who are willing to and available to work with Hawaii entities to hopefully make them better. So with that, any questions? We'd love to entertain any questions, any comments. Hopefully that's been helpful to provide you those resources. And now I can see you all, so this is good. Hopefully I haven't just overwhelmed you all. Thank you for the feedback in the chat. I appreciate that. Does anyone use anything besides the grant opportunities list? Or have you heard of any of these? Hopefully they're new to you, which is good, you know, just getting the word out and letting you all know these are here. Will you save us each a slot in the coaching group? Go ahead and apply, you know. We meet on Tuesdays to talk through whoever applies and what we can accommodate.
Melissa, I just wanted to say that it is incredibly helpful to get that weekly listing from you. I think we are all pretty familiar with the resources that you are curating from, but to have everything in one place is tremendously helpful. And with the little descriptions, we know if that is something that, you know, really applies to the mission of our project or organization. So you've just made it really, really easy for us to figure out what is kind of the best fit for what we're trying to look for in terms of funding. Are you able to comment on how some grants might be more competitive than others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, for sure, you know, one of the things I look at is how many awards they're offering, and I don't list the ones that just say one, right? Those are ones where usually the agencies know who they want to fund, and they're just putting it out there. You know, with all of the things that they're describing what this organization might be doing, but not actually naming the organization, because otherwise that'd be an earmark, right? So I usually don't list those. You know, I generally, unless you have something that's really strong, has good background data, has a good collaboration, you know, I usually don't really try to go after the ones that have, say, 5 or fewer awards. Really like to look at the ones that are much bigger. But I mean, that being said, I have seen some new collaborations come together and actually be picked for those. So it's really about that, you know, go, no go based on your return on investment calculation, just kind of figuring out what your resources are, maybe how much time, you know, to the actual due date that you have, like what other partners you might need to bring into play. Also the different elements that are required. You know, one of the things, and I do a lot of grants trainings, you know, one of the things that I really, really emphasize to people is read the funding announcement. You know, I've gotten in from like start to finish, at least once through. You know, I've gotten into a lot of different teams and worked with a lot of universities where the principal investigators get on the call and they haven't even done that, you know, and so it's kind of, wow, you know, are you sure you want to go after this? Because then they get to page 30 and the fine print is, you know, something that's actually disqualifying them, and they should have gotten that like way ahead of time without wasting everyone's time. So, you know, it's that kind of thing. Read it all the way through. And anyway, I'm happy to provide more trainings, but, you know, if you look on our School Rasmussen site, we have a resources page that has some of the previous trainings that I've done if you wanted to go through that, but it talks about different tips on prospecting, on the grant writing process itself, and different things on there. So feel free to take a look. We also have a session that Dr. Amy Grace of University of Hawaii did that was on congressional budgeting and appropriations process. Which is, you know, alive and well in another avenue. And people have talked about earmarks and congressionally directed spending. That's like another avenue that's open right now for funding. So, you know, feel free to look at the site for those opportunities. It's a question, how do we sign up for the weekly opportunities list? So yeah, that one, I think it's just posted on Vibrant Hawaii. So Janice, you go ahead and post it. Yeah, so that's great. It's a good place to go. You can go to the Hano website as well. And thank you, Jane, for posting the resources page. Appreciate that.
Melissa, I was also curious because you've been tracking how much money is sort of available to local or just organizations in general. How much more money are we seeing now than say a year or 2 years ago, or even pre-COVID? Just seems like
Mhm.
there's a lot of money that has been made available by the federal government, by philanthropy. And so we really got to take advantage of these resources.
No, I think that's a great question. Definitely with the COVID stimulus packages, those have, brought just such an infusion of resources. So, I mean, right now it's trying to make sure that we have the projects that make sense there, and then maybe can be scaffolded later once you accomplish different things under those grants. Looking at the regular grant cycle, these things that are competed year after year, maybe every 6 months, how can you prepare for that one so that when the stimulus funding runs out, you can have something that the program will just fall off a cliff, or maybe philanthropy, local or national. But really, right now with the increase in the infusion of resources, it's really good to be able to connect maybe the past data, current data, and then look forward ahead just to make sure that it's going to be a sustainable effort, because the resources will continue to flow, but maybe at a lower level.
I'm curious if we could engage folks through the chat. I'm just curious to know kind of where you're at in your grant experience. So if you could take a moment to type into the chat, if you have never submitted a grant before, you could put a 0. If you've submitted, like 3 or less grants, you could put a 1. And if you are like, you've done this is your day job kind of thing, if you could put a 2. I'm just curious what the mix is right now of folks. Oh, Marsha's like blowing us. She's a 5. Anybody needs help with grant writing, Marsha's your girl.
It's not for the faint-hearted, there's a lot of hurry up and wait, right? Usually you have to apply. And what I tell my clients is don't take something on that only has about 30 days until it's due. You really want to have that time to marinate over some of the ideas, make sure they fit, maybe even advocate with the program officers a little bit to say, hey, look, this is my idea. What do you think? Is this aligned? And then, actually spend the time to put the application together in a really compelling way. So, it really does take that time to be able to do that. But I like the mix that you have here. This is great. I mean, it's about collaboration too. This is really something that we've been talking about a lot at the Nonprofit Grants Working Group. How do you put different entities together? How do we get to know, who is interested in applying, who's got the capacity to apply, and who has got the capacity to partner with others? Because then maybe if you can do that, you can ask for larger amounts of money, have greater impact for a community, and ultimately be more competitive in whatever you're going to submit. So, if you can find the secret sauce to be able to do that and go after some of these larger competitions, that would be truly impactful. A beginner question, would you say that a grant and an RFP are one and the same? Oh, yeah. I mean, you got to love the federal agencies that don't standardize across the agencies. Some of them call them NOFOs, right? Notice of funding opportunities, some funding opportunity announcements, FOA, some RFPs. I think there's program descriptions out of NSF. So, they have cooperative agreements. I mean, they have a lot of different names for these things. So, yeah, you have to kind of just get familiar with the agencies that you're looking at, because each agency will use its different lingo. Yeah, great question though. Just hired a grant consultant for a nonprofit. Nerve-wracking to spend money to get money. Yeah, well, for the DC firm that I was at, we built a grants network, and I still work with them right now, but we have a grants network that went from 0 to more than 300 today. And really that was a lot of finding some really great people, wonderful generalists, but also finding some people who looked great on paper, but had terrible bedside manner, just didn't know how to work with the nonprofits, didn't know how to be patient with them, or maybe the personalities just didn't gel. And so, it is a lot more art than science to find that person who has that subject matter expertise, at least to some degree, that they can help you out and speak your language and then translate that to the funder, and can write well as well, right? And so that's the thing. It is a trick to find the right consultant. And I know some clients who have tried different, they've gone through a couple of them until they found the one that really works for them. Or grow your own internally too. There's a lot of training. On the job is probably the best, to be truthful, but there's a lot of, again, free resources out there from federal agencies and others. All right.
Melissa, writing a federal grant is a bear. It's really, not for the faint of heart. And so do you have advice for the group around, that a federal grant, say from the EDA or USDA, probably shouldn't be your first? It could be, right? It could be. But do you have some ideas for how folks can sort of build up capacity and bandwidth with other smaller local level grants so that they feel kind of confident? So one day they can go after those larger, more complicated federal funds.
No, great question. With so many of the smaller grant applications for local foundations, they're asking some of the same overall things. And so just building up that text, your story. So, things about your organization. What's your organization capacity, capability? What about your team? What's their capacity and capability? What's the experience? So that helps you go through that process of being able to refine your resumes or your bio sketches or whatever else that you need to put in a federal grant. They're going to ask about the need and the background, usually local grants and federal grants. And so data, I know, has been very tricky to find, especially for some of the rural areas. And so starting early and trying to figure out where you get that information for your smaller local grant. And then you see the gaps where, oh gosh, I wonder if I have to launch a study or talk to the UH, maybe there's a researcher there who might want to help me, figure out what I need to get here so that I can then put that in my federal application, maybe a year from now. Things like that, and then they're going to ask what you want to do, with the money. And so like being able to work through the budget, starting with a logic model, hopefully, try to figure out what your outcomes and your outputs are, just to make sure what you're submitting will make sense. And that is, again, for the local level and for the federal level, really the logic model is a wonderful way to just kind of walk through that process, as well as budget. Some of my more experienced clients will start with that budget first and just make sure that the logic model and the budget kind of align, they actually go together, because if they don't, then you'll know you have problems. And so, the federal grants, they usually need a lot more information about what you're going to be doing with those budget lines and how you justify those. They want you to have a detailed narrative, to show that you've actually done your homework and thought through, okay, for this supply, I actually went and tried Office Depot and Target and Walmart, and this is how much it is, actually getting down to that granular level. They want to show that you've gone through that thought process. But some of the foundations and these others, they might just like need a 5-line budget or something. So again, yeah, all those things at the local level or for some of the smaller grants will help you train up for the larger federal grant. And some of these are competed on an annual basis, and they don't necessarily change from year to year. So you could also look at what you might want to go after and then figure out what your gaps are to get to what's actually needed, what they're asking for, So, but yeah, that's great, Ashley.
I have somewhat of a follow-up on that line. Do you see common mistakes among beginners that, if we were to start off with helpful hints, and as you prepare your document before you do your final review, here's the top 5 things to look for, whether that's formatting or word count, or some funders are very particular about that, but are there a set of most frequent tips that you would want beginners to have?
Oh boy, I could go on for hours about that, so I probably shouldn't. And I need to change names to protect the innocent. But seriously, and I've got so many thoughts with that question. It's so insane. But yeah, it is about, you can see where you have multiple writing styles and people who have been working on the application. You really need somebody to take ownership of it and just be that final, hey, the understanding is this group is kind of writing by committee, but I'm going to go through and just make sure this whole thing sounds like it was written by one person or one entity, and having maybe a style guide would be useful. I mean, maybe overall for the organization itself, but also just for your grants so that everybody knows, are you going to use the Okinas or diacriticals or not? How are we referring to ourselves as an organization? Like those things, if you can standardize that early on, again, just overall for the organization, but that'll help once you get to the grants. That'd be really, really great. A lot of it is also just, again, the time, building in the timeline. So what I usually do is I start at the end, this is when the due date is, I'm going to back it up. This is when we're going to have our first kickoff meeting. And then in between, like filling in, maybe it's weekly meetings with the group, just putting those on people's calendars before the time goes away. And then, with that time, okay, when are we going to put in, the first draft is due here, second draft here, and then building in all the reviews. That's a thing. I mean, a lot of people just leave it up to the last minute and then, it's like hair on fire and, the thing is just a mess at the end. So if you can just, build in that timeline right up front and get everyone who's going to be working on this to understand that that's the timeline and we need to stick to it. That's really important to do. So yeah, I probably have a lot of other things, but those are some of the overall thoughts. If you can set up a process for your organization as to how to work through these things, it's really about grants culture, I guess, if you will. The understanding that these things take time. Maybe I guess the other thing too is, and this is much more an overall strategic thing, which is that a lot of organizations chase the money, right? And that's a no-no. I mean, what I like to do with clients, again, given the luxury of time, is to start with their idea. What is it that you want to fund? Let's write that up in a 1 to 2 page concept paper first, and then figure out which funding opportunities actually fit those things. Because otherwise, if you're just like looking at the next new shiny object and you're going after this, and then you end up with the funding and it's taking you so far off your mission. Why'd you do that, right? So I guess, again, that's like overall strategic question, but that's kind of where I like to start. It's like, don't chase the money, figure out what your organization truly needs and what you can implement, and then start there and then figure out what can fund it. So I don't know if that like answered your question, but it's just triggered a bunch of things for me. So
yeah, so that's very helpful. And those are often things that beginners don't realize, right? You have a team of people, and when you're all reading it, it makes perfect sense to you. But when you give it to a third party, they're like, oh, there were 3 authors that wrote this, and it's so obvious to them. So appreciate the tips.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, through the HANO Grants Technical Assistance Services Program, the review part is so critical because it's not just somebody, your third party is coming in and just reading it. We actually do a rubric that looks at the funding announcement and says, okay, section 1B, this, you're supposed to say this, but you only get 50% on that because you only said this. We actually go section by section and make sure that the applications are compliant with the funding opportunity. And that's, absolutely critical to build in that kind of time, whether you do it through that program or otherwise, just to have that section by section, really detail oriented person come in and make sure questions are being answered and the details are there. Okay, so let's see, we applied with OVW in 2021, application was rejected. Letter stated we could request a copy of review comments. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, these agencies are supposed to be giving you that feedback. And sometimes people go through the congressional delegation if they really haven't gotten answers, at least with the congressionals, what they interface with is usually the legislative affairs or the government affairs offices at these agencies, and it just kind of brings the question to the top of the pile. So you don't necessarily want to make your funder upset with you, but if it's been a long time and you really just need to have those essential questions answered, just to say whether you're going to go after it again, you can use the congressional offices to help with that. But if you don't get the written comments, you can maybe also ask them for a brief, like 10-15-minute meeting. Maybe they can review it that way. Some of them may not have permission to put that out. I mean, usually they do. Usually they're supposed to send something out with reasons, but some of them will say there are just too many applications that came into this program and we don't have the manpower to be able to, to tell everybody what the shortfalls were. So unfortunately that does happen.
Hi there. I'd like to jump in. Thanks for hosting this session. My name is Megan. I work with the Kohala Center. I'm a grant writer. Melissa, it's so wonderful to meet you. I'm really inspired by your work. I just wanted to tag on to your comments on like advice for beginners, especially in the federal grant space. So typically, in order to make the competition fair, there is like a very clear scoring scheme or like a rubric. Melissa used that term. Usually it's located towards the end of the instructions. So like read the instructions cover to cover, read them several times, because ultimately, in a tactical sense, what you're trying to do is get the highest score. And there's a very explicit, in most federal contexts, there's a very explicit scheme that the agency's using. So even though your project may have a lot of merit, it may be very innovative, I think one mistake I see a lot is people get really fixated on how great their project is and they forget that they're writing for a specific audience that's looking for certain things so they can give you a score. So if you understand how to play the game, I'm a big sports fan, so grant writing is kind of like competitive writing in a sense. If you know what it takes to get a higher score, then you can use your limited time and resources to make sure those elements of the proposal are successful. And it's never a guarantee that you're going to be funded, but just in terms of the process, I find that people really miss that point. And it's essential for making it across the finish line and getting to yes. So I just wanted to add that. Read the rubric.
No, you are spot on. And you're right. They do put those at the bottom of the funding announcement. So maybe it's page 40, maybe it's page 70, and you really got to look for that. So absolutely, it is competitive writing and it is about points. And sometimes it really is just the editing that will take you from not funded to funded, and it's just a percentage point. It all depends on who else is in the game with you. And well, so the other thing is, some agencies are not removed from politics, right? So, I mean, some of the agencies, you absolutely can't do congressional support letters. They'll actually state that, it doesn't make a difference. It may actually hurt you. But other agencies don't say that. And that's because, a lot of the decision makers, once it goes through the merit review panel, it probably goes up to the politicals, and that's where they have to kind of make decisions. Did I get a call from Senator so-and-so, or is there a letter in there from Senator so-and-so? And so those things can sway the decisions here and there as well. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially that because Hawaii has 2 appropriations committee members. That's really it's really unusual for a small delegation like we have, and it's 4 people, to have 2 appropriators. So I would take advantage of that as much as you can where it makes sense for the agency you're applying.
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa, for your presentation and spending time with us this morning. I know that information like this sometimes takes time to absorb, especially for those that are seeing it for the very first time. So we'll be sure to share the resources with our group, and in a minute, I can screen share and show everybody where the resource is located on our Vibrant Hawaii page. But I wanted to just pause here and say mahalo to Melissa for sharing this information with us. I know that it's been very helpful, even for those that are seasoned, to hear this information again. So mahalo nui loa.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. All right. I'll go ahead and pop off now so you all can share, but thank you. Very nice to spend the time with you all. Aloha.